Yeah. A little bit of an introduction. I was 17 years. Everyone can hear me? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone can hear? Yeah. If I need to raise my voice, just let me know. So I was 17 years old and living in Teaneck, New Jersey, and something was pulling me to Montana. And I was a Deadhead. Went to Dead concerts, Dead shows, and spun around, dropped acid, and I was trying to figure out spirituality because grew up Reform, and there wasn't the spirituality wasn't in the Reform. So I was, I wanted something authentic. So and LSD is sort of fun, but it only goes so far, So after a little while, I wanted more. Like I did LSD, I did mushrooms, I went to Dead shows, but what else was there? There had to have been something more, something real. So I knew that if I was going to find that thing, whatever it was, I wasn't going to find it in New Jersey, in Teaneck. So at 17, I joined a group of volunteers to build playgrounds on the Blackfeet Reservation. So I get to the Blackfeet Reservation, and it was nice. We were building playgrounds in Glacier Park, but again, there had to have been more. What else was there? What was I missing? And this group, this assembly, really reminds me of a real powerful experience. It was in this group that I was a part of. So every so often, a tribal figure would come and give a talk. Buster Yellow Kidney came in and spoke. Buster Yellow Kidney was the wartime chief of the Blackfeet Nation. And the joke was that he was always the acting chief because the Blackfeet were always at war. It was a warring tribe, sort of the Blackfeet and the Sioux were always at war. And that's a whole talk about how they actually go to war. They go to war nowadays not by fighting their fellow tribe, but usually by joining the U.S. Army or the U.S. Marines, and they volunteer for all sorts of missions, and that's how the Blackfeet go to war today. It's a real part of their personhood and their nationhood to go to war and to count coup. So how do they count coup now? They're not living in teepees now. They're not going to steal somebody else's horse or somebody else's car. So how do they do that? They do that by joining the Marines and getting special units and going places that are covert, and that's how they practice as part of their spirituality now. So anyway, so we had Buster Yellow Kidney come and speak with us, and it's interesting actually because Buster and Raful Franklin had a lot to do with each other, and Buster worked for. He was retired, but when he was working for the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Every area needs to have an FBI personnel, like Raful Franklin was working for the Bureau of Land Management, right? Buster came and spoke, and one of the stories he told a few stories. One of the stories was about a bear, and he and his nephew and his son were in Glacier Park, and they were camping, and it was wintertime, and sound travels far in the snow. And they heard from the other mountain over 3 gunshots going off consecutively. And being the area FBI agent, Buster had to go investigate it. So there was a ranger station below in the valley. So they got themselves dressed and they trekked out to the ranger station. When they get to the ranger station, they see, they discuss what the plan should be with the ranger. And at daybreak, they head out to where they heard the shots from. Well, as they were heading out, one of the poachers walks in and totally eviscerated. And so they called the helicopter for him, but I don't think that he made it to the hospital. But Buster gets to, Buster and his 2 sons, they get to the area that they heard the shots. And right away they see the bear, big male grizzly bear. And they see 2 guys frozen under ice, 2 of the poachers. And Buster comes up with a plan. He wasn't planning this, so he had his gun, and it had 3 bullets in it. And his boys, he tells his boys to stand about 2 basketball courts distance away from the bear and start throwing stones at it. And he was going to stand 1 basketball court between them behind a tree. And when the bear would start running, he'd pop out and start shooting it. And so that's what happened. And he shoots the bear in the head, and the bear just keeps going. Grizzly bear just keeps on running. Shoots it a second time. So now about half a football field distance. Keeps on running. About 15 feet, shoots it a 3rd time, and that's it. Nothing left to do. So he just figured that was it. And 5 feet away, the bear just collapsed by his feet. And he said it was the only time he can remember in his adult life losing his bladder. And he's a big, tough guy, Buster. He had these big, gnarly fingers, bent from arthritis, but just beautiful hands, these big, beautiful hands and fingers. And so anyway, but he told us during, I don't know why that story comes to mind to tell, but one time, but he mentioned that one time he went up into the woods. I'm sorry, his mother passed away, and his several aunts passed away, and he felt that I think his wife passed away. Many of the women very close to him passed away, all basically within a few weeks' time or a few months' time, whatever it was. And he figured that he needed to join them. So he went up to a mountaintop and he didn't take any food or water, and figured he was just gonna call it quits. Just gonna call it quits. So he gets to the mountain, and he spends the night. And he was just waiting for his strength to ebb, so that he could just join his wife and his mother and his aunts. And spent the night up there, still had plenty of strength. And the next morning, a flock of bald eagles came and swooped down. Bald eagles don't usually fly in a flock, so you never saw such a thing. They swooped down right above his head, and then down the mountain and into the valley towards his home. And he took it to mean that this was that the eagles were telling him, go back to life. You have more life to live. Life isn't over yet. You're not meant to join them. Not yet. So he told us that story, and then whenever somebody would come, I'd buy a little pouch of tobacco for them as a gift, show my appreciation. So because the Native Americans, very, tobacco is they sort of like what they used to pray with. So I brought him a pouch of tobacco, and he invited me to his home. So I go to his home a couple days later, and he's sleeping. No, first he was taking a nap. Whatever, it was always something else until he finally came out. And in the meantime, I got very close to his son. His son's name is Tiny Man Yellow Kidney. And Tiny Man was showing us the tall sweetgrass that they would cut and braid, and he was showing us just the beauty of his father's property. Just his father lived in a small little trailer on about, I don't know how many acres, but hundreds and hundreds of acres, probably thousands of acres. Just beautiful land, rolling hills. And so Tiny Man schmoozed with me for a while about his experiences, and then eventually his father was ready to see us. So they were having, I was only 17, and there were a bunch of people there. They were having a very adult conversation. Didn't hold the interest of a 17-year-old. So the friend of mine who I was with is Israeli, and he was telling Tiny Man about Israel and about the Jewish people. Tiny Man really felt very, very inspired. And having grown up Reform in a very, very left-leaning family, and I still am very left-leaning, but I had nothing good to say about Israel. It was, an apartheid state, so I said something very, I don't know what I said, but very derogatory about the state of Israel. And Tiny Man, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, so you don't like Jews?" And I said, "No, I like Jews. I am Jewish." He said, "You're Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, actually, probably, "You're a Jewish?" So speaking this way, I said, "Yeah, I'm Jewish." He said, and this is how you speak about your land, about your people?" I said, "Well, I'm just saying the truth as I see it. It's it's an apartheid state. What can I do?" So he says, "I want you to make yourself a cup of coffee, and then I want you to join me outside. We got to have a talk." So I make myself a cup of coffee and go outside with Tiny Man. And Tiny Man says, well, he gave me a whole schmooze, but he said a few things. He said, "You're really, really, really fortunate to be part of the Jewish people, because wherever your people are in the world, you can always go to one of their places of worship, and you'll know the language a little bit, and you know the songs a little bit, and you'll be able to worship with them a little bit." He says, "By me, outside of the reservation here, I don't know. I'm lost." And he said, he said, "Oh," and he said, you might not like some of the leaders, but some of the leaders aren't your people. I think he even said rabbis. He said, "So you might not like some of your rabbis, but the rabbis aren't your people. You have to connect with your people, and you have to connect with the way your grandfathers approached their religion." And that really set me on a journey. And then he said a few other things. He said, because I was very critical of my family, and the way he put it was he said to me, your mother and your father are like your two legs that you stand on, and your brothers and sisters are like your arms, and without them, you're really crippled. That's how he said it. And he said, so you have to stop being so derogatory towards them, because they're what hold you up and keep you moving. And then he told us, and then he told me about taking a stand. He said, you got to take a stand for what you believe in. He said, back in the days before the white man, when there was a young Blackfeet man who wanted to individuate himself. I don't think he used the word individuate, but when there was a young man who wanted to, take a stand, individuate himself, he would wait until summer camp broke for winter camp, and he would stay there. He would stay in the summer camp when the camp broke and left for winter camp. And one of two things would happen. He would always realize his mistake, but he would either not be able to get to the winter camp in time and he would freeze to death, or he'd realize it in time and get to winter camp. And he said when they would get to winter camp, he wouldn't move it back into his parents' teepee. They call it a lodge. They don't say teepee, they say lodge. He wouldn't move into his parents' lodge. He would build his own lodge, and the people would help him. He said, so you got to build your own lodge, but that doesn't mean you can be critical of your parents. And then he gave me a gift, and the gift, I want to say it was a song. It was a native song. So I want to play it for you. Maybe grab some instruments and you could sing it along. I'll teach it to you. He said to me, one day you'll teach it to others. He said, one day you'll teach it to others, and it's called the Old Lady Song. Whoever has the tongue drum can.
This one uses.
Whoever has the guy. Oh yeah. Oh, the flute. Yeah. Yeah, hey, 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 yeah, oh. Yeah, hey, yeah, hey, yeah, hey, yeah, yeah, hey, 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 yeah, oh. Yeah, hey, 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 yeah, oh. Yeah, hey, 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 yeah, oh. So he taught me that, and so that's my way of introductions. So let's have a sort of a choice. We could play some rhythms, and or if you want to hear more stories, tell more stories. So it's really up to both. Sure.
Maybe a rhythm and then a story.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
good. So let's have a rhythm for the intention. Let's set an intention for the rhythm of bringing the past forward in a new way. So I want that to be the intention that we set for the rhythm, bringing the past forward, but in a new way.
And for anyone who doesn't have an instrument, feel free to just use, clap, use your feet. Dr. Klempner was talking about how children will like stamp their feet and.
Yeah, it's cool to watch. My kids do it all the time. They express themselves through their feet. They'll without even realizing it. They'll if they're angry about something, they'll just stomp. If they're happy, they'll sort of go like that. But all the time, my kids are doing something to express themselves with their feet without realizing it. It's because really our bodies are all rhythmic. Our hearts, our lungs, our blood, everything is just flowing. And a lot of I believe that a lot of the distress we see in the world is just sort of people being cut off from their own internal rhythms and being cut off from the rhythms of one another and the rhythms of the land and the rhythms and the beats of the earth. So one reason why I'm really grateful for Eli giving me this opportunity, because to begin talking about this is something I really want to start talking about. I see in there's so many of them, and especially in the Orthodox world. I guess maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but really cut off from the land. And what I was given on the Blackfeet Reservation, just about bringing that forward, bringing what we can take from the land forward. So yeah, another story comes to mind. So let's play a rhythm first, and then we'll so everyone, maybe one person starts. Maybe if you don't mind, maybe you can start with the djembe. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. And then maybe you can go, and then maybe you go, and then we'll all sort of join in. Is that all right? Okay. So, another story, and today's also the yard site of the Balatanya. So maybe I should tell also a story just about the Balatanya. But another story just about nature and rhythms and connecting to rhythm. Sort of this story really, I still remember it, so it must have really struck or really deep chord with me. It's in Montana, and there was a dispute over it was mineral rights, in the Flathead Mountain Range, and drilling with the Flathead Mountains have the greatest density per square mile of grizzly bears than any other place in the continental United States. And so anything regarding drilling would have consequences on the grizzly bear population. So there was a public hearing, probably somewhere in Polson. It's probably in Polson or one of those towns on the Flathead Reservation. And now the Bitterroot Mountains are owned by the Flathead tribe. So the mining corporations were trying to convince the Flathead people, the Flathead Nation, that that mining would be good for them financially, and it would, but the Flathead were very concerned what the repercussions would be on the grizzly bear population. So there was a hearing of environmentalists and scientists, with scientists being on both sides. Scientists being on the side of the environmentalists, and the scientists being on the side of the the mining corporations. Um, and it was going back and forth between, the whole evening was going back and forth. One scientist saying why it was advantageous for the grizzlies to have mining. I don't really understand how that could be possible, but guess I'm not the brightest chap in the world. So, but then there were scientists arguing, obviously, why it wouldn't be good for there to be mining, and they were going back and forth. And finally, there was a flathead elder who got up to speak, and I was not at this hearing, but some people were speaking about it the day afterwards. And this elder, he got up to speak, and he said, "All evening, I've been hearing people, white people, saying what's best for the grizzly bear. I've been hearing white people say that not mining is best for the grizzly. And I've been hearing white people say that mining is best for the grizzly. But I've not yet heard anybody ask, what does the grizzly have to say about it? What does the grizzly want? Why don't any of you white people ask the grizzly what's best for the grizzly?" And that really, the next day, people were I think they stopped speaking after that. Nothing else to say. And it's powerful. Why not ask it? And here we live. We have the good fortune of living in Eretz HaKodesh, being able to walk these holy streets of Eretz Yisrael, and especially here in Yerushalayim, the holy streets of Yerushalayim. And I have a friend who lives in Yavniel, Roni, and Roni always tells me, he says, "Binyamin, don't just look at the ground in front of you that you're walking on. Also look at the sky above you that you're walking under." We have to do that too. We have to really be in touch with the rhythm. There's a rhythm. There's a beat that the earth has under our feet, especially here in Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael in general, especially in Yerushalayim. The sky above us has a pulse. We really have to get our own pulse in order. We have to get on the same pulse as the earth, as the pulse of the earth, the pulse of the sky. I'm afraid I'm speaking a little bit too much like a Native American, but there's a lot of truth to it. Just getting in tune with the pulse, with the rhythm, the melody. Also, the melody. The sky has a melody. The earth has a melody. Are we listening to the melodies? Those are melodies that can heal us. So much depression and anxiety in the world. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're not in touch with our own melodies. We're not in touch with the melody of the sky we're walking under, the melody of the earth that we're walking on, or the melody of the food that we're eating. Like how much food nowadays is just, like saran wrap, not much different from saran wrap. So okay, enough of my rants. So a little story about the Balatanya. The Balatanya. So there are two businessmen, and they left whatever town they were from. They were business partners, and they left their home and they traveled for several years. They left their wife and children behind. Their wives and children behind. That's what people used to do back. There's no just stop at one village and another village and another village, sometimes for years. And eventually they made their way far out into Russia. They had forgotten that they were they forgot about Shabbos. They forgot about eating kosher. They forgot about Yom Tovim. and they pretty much forgot even that they were Jewish. And and they traveled in this way for months, uh, probably over a year, just forgetting that they were even Jewish, until they made their way to the town of, you have to help me, Gabriella. I forgot the name of the town that the Balatani is buried in.
Oh, Hedich?
Hadich.
Hadich.
Thank you. So until they got to Hadich, and they made their way to an inn, and at this point they had shaved their beards and cut their payas and weren't wearing, weren't covering their heads, and there was nothing, outwardly Jewish about them. And the innkeeper at Hadich, he asked them, if they would like kosher food. And they said, no, we don't need to eat kosher food. We can eat whatever you want to serve us is good. But how do you know that we're even Jewish? Why would you think to ask? And he says, oh, I ask everyone who comes to this inn if they would like kosher food. And okay, I thought it was a little bit funny, but they didn't think much of it. And they, the innkeeper showed them to a room, and it was a room with a very heavy door. It was a big, heavy door, and there were no windows in this room. And he lit a candle for them in the room. They should have light. And then he closed the door behind them and locked it from the outside so they couldn't get out. And there was a little like opening in the door, like a little slot that he could, open and see them and speak to them through. So he opened it and he told them that they should put their lives in order because he was coming to shech them the next day, and they couldn't believe it. It just happened. But they start davening, praying. They are doing, really, they're just, putting all of their affairs back in order and talking to Hashem in a way they hadn't spoken to God since they just got so into business and so into making money they forgot, sort of like the world is today, so into business and so into just pursuit of money that money became the God they spoke to. And they realized this guy was going to shech them the next day. Money wasn't important to them anymore. They were just praying and connecting with Hashem and crying and really doing tshuva from in a real way, just having neglected the relationship with God and crying. And the next day they hear him coming, and he opens up the slot in the door so that they can, they should hear him sharpening the knife, and they see through this hole. It's like big knife he's sharpening it, making sure to make a lot of noise sharpening it. They should really hear it, and they're just crying and saying vidoy, but not just saying vidoy like sometimes we do on Yom Kippur, but really saying vidoy like it's vidoy, they're really saying vidoy and connecting, because that's really what vidoy is. It's about the connection, and they're connecting, setting things back in order. Like we have, the 12 steps, making amends. That's what they were doing. That's what vidoy is. It's amends. They were making amends with Hashem. They were making amends with the Eibishter, and they were making amends like it really mattered. And then the fellow opens the door and he says, come on, I want to tell you a story. So I can't believe it. What's going on? He says, I'm not going to shech you. Don't worry, you're fine. But I have to tell you I have to tell you what just happened. You have to understand what happened. So years ago, there was a man, holy rabbi, who was traveling through Hadich, and he needed an inn to stay in. So he stayed at their inn. He stayed at that inn. And while he was in Hadich, he got very ill and he passed away. But before passing away, and that was the room he passed away in. He said, but before passing away, he called this non-Jewish innkeeper and told him that he gives him his blessing, but that he wants a favor. And the favor is that eventually there will be 2 Jewish businessmen who will come to his inn, and there will be nothing externally Jewish about them. And he should do whatever it takes to get them to remember their Judaism, and then he should remind them to go home back to their wives and children. So that's what they did. And the Baal Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, he had such he wasn't just concerned about, he wasn't just interested in, he was interested in people who lived way after him. Even today, I feel like when I open up a Tanya, I feel like, I'm learning with the Baal Tanya, And really, everyone who opens up a Tanya, he wrote the Tanya for us, So yeah, Schus Yergen Leno, on this.
He died in a random inn.
Well,
He died in
in Hadich, yeah.
That's Hasidim.
There were some sitting with him, but no, it was really yeah, and they'd actually say that after he passed away, so there was a Chabad community that formed in Hadich, and they say when there was a hidden passageway in the floor of the Ohel that when there was like a fake that lift that came out, and then there was a tunnel under this that went deep into the forest in Hadich, and so when obviously the only person who knew about this hidden passageway was the elderly caretaker of the Ohel, and they say that when the Nazis rounded up all the Jews of Hadich, so they put them all in the Ohel, and this elderly fellow knew about this passageway, and he lifted it up. Evidently, I don't know how it was made, but evidently the only way to open it could only be opened and closed from the outside. In other words, it couldn't be closed back from inside, and it could only be closed from the outside, which meant somebody needed to remain outside to close it back up. And so he sent everyone through this hole, and then he closed it back up and stayed there, and he gave his life so that the other Jews could escape. And I think they all made it out. So yeah, it's close to the Baal Tanya, caring about all the Eden, even until Mashiach, and past that, So yeah, let's see what time is it?
9:06. We've got about an hour.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's
Do you want to do another rhythm? Should we do some somatic stuff? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe rhythm and then
some
somatic.
somatic stuff. Yeah. Let's
Okay.
do that. Here, I'll take the flute.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do let's do some short rhythms. let's do some short rhythms. Let's do a rhythm on I think probably most of us are from other places. And just being in Israel, you know, it's an adjustment, you know, like Hebrew is not our first language. Some of us speak better Hebrew, some of us less. But it's an adjustment. So let's do a rhythm about adjustment with the intention. Let's set an intention for the rhythm of adjustment. It should be an adjustment rhythm. Josh, why don't you start us off with an adjustment rhythm? You want this? Hold it from the handle. Yeah. That's great. Ellie, you want to do some semantic stuff?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we've got like a two-part thing. Okay, so somatic experiencing is it's like a body-based trauma therapy. It was designed originally for people with PTSD, like veterans. Basically, the idea is instead of, when you talk about things, first of all, you activate different parts of the brain when you talk about things versus when you experience it in your body. But also, like when you talk about your story, you're just going more into it and re-traumatizing yourself, right? So there are like body-based techniques that they do to recreate what you felt during the trauma and working through it now. So the first technique we're going to use is really simple. I'm just going to ask you to give yourself a hug, power of touch, like think about hugging another person or getting a hug from another person, except you're just giving it to yourself. So just get in there, Let's see what that feels like. I'll hold it for maybe a little less than a minute or so. It's not threatening, you know, you're just accepting a hug from someone who hopefully you trust. We'll hold it for another 15 seconds or so. Okay, so now stay in the hug. The second part is from EMDR, which is what we're going to do is called tapping, and it integrates the right side and left side of your brain, right? So just give some gentle taps up and down your arm. You know, you're still in the hugging position, so just play around with it, different rhythm, different whatever feels good. There's no wrong answer. You know, close your eyes, get into it. We'll do this for another 15 seconds. When you're ready, let it go. Just check in with how you feel. Do you feel the same as before you did that? Worse, better? No wrong answer. So, you know, we don't really need to be dependent on other people for hugs. I mean, obviously we do need other people, but there can, you know, often when you're alone, you can give yourself a hug and calm yourself down.
Well, we don't need to be dependent.
We don't need, right. We don't need to be dependent on, we need other people. We don't need to be dependent on other people. Exactly. All right. So now let's see if we can, you know, what we were doing with the rhythm, which kind of came natural, and then what we were doing with the tapping is also a different form of rhythm, you know. Also just comes naturally. Your body knows what it wanted. Did it want something slower, something faster, softer, harder? So just pay attention to what your body knows, what it wants. You know, sometimes we have like all these thoughts in our head about what we want or feelings, but the body really knows what it wants more than we do. So, yeah. Take a deep breath and let it out, you know. Thank you for practicing that with me. Should we do another rhythm, another story? What are you guys thinking?
Maybe, what do you want? Another rhythm, another story? Mars, whatever you guys want.
Another story would be wonderful.
Yeah, story?
Okay.
Yeah? Yeah, story.
Awesome.
I haven't told this story for a while. There's two stories come to mind. I don't know why they're coming to mind, but two stories are popping into my mind, asking to be told. So the first story. Well, hold on. Let me ask first. Do you guys want a story like a Hasidic story, or a story about, like, you know, Montana Indians? Like what?
I think that Montana is so unique.
Okay.
It's so unique. I learned so much, and I'm so happy and so grateful to you told these stories and
Okay.
know these amazing characters.
Okay,
It's
so
the land healing that we need.
okay, so story about hmm.
You want to take a little?
You know what? Thank you for asking. I'll have a cup of tea.
I have a tea that's tomato.
Oh,
So,
so okay. Should I start or okay? Or wait for that. So, mm, thank you so much. So, this is an interesting story. First, just I'll tell a few stories that Buster told me. It's it's important to have a sense of humor and certain sort of tease. My wife and kids accuse me rightfully that I'm a tease. I like to tease. They're right. And I think Buster was a real tease. Hey, and I'll tell you also, Gabriella, I'll tell you the Boston Rebbe also was a real tease. He loved to tease. I mean, people he wouldn't tease somebody who he didn't know, but people who he felt very close with, he would tease, like affectionately,
Yeah.
you know. So Buster Yellowkin, he was a real teaser. So the story goes like this. And in fact, I told this story at an inner city school, and the boys who I told the story to, one of the guys realized he was being teased, the other didn't, and they almost started a fight with each other because the guy who didn't realize that I was teasing them was took it very serious, and the other guy was laughing. The guy was started a fight between them until I realized that was a joke. But anyway, maybe I shouldn't have told you it was a joke because maybe some of you. But so Buster told me this. So he said he's out hunting, and it was almost towards the end of the day. He was out hunting. It was towards the end of the day, and make a bracha.
Amen.
So he's out hunting, and towards the end of the day, and there's a big cow elk, huge cow elk, biggest he'd ever seen. Comes walking right up to his camp, and she's cool as can be. And he picks up his rifle, and she doesn't run, she just stands there. And his rifle's loaded, he's ready, ready to go hunting, and fires it, it drops. Huge animal, majestic, and on impulse, and he'd never done anything like this before. On impulse, he decides to cut the head off of the elk right in the woods. So he does it, and he puts the elk's head, leans it against a tree, and then he decides on impulse again, and he never did anything like this, to start skinning the animal, to just start skinning the hide off of the animal. And there's only a little flap of skin left, about, maybe like a patch about this much, connecting the hide to the rest of this, beautiful animal. And like a 700 kilo animal, a big animal. And it's almost dark at this point, almost dark. The sun's already set. It's really, just a little bit of light left. And just out of the blue, after lying there headless for about 3 hours, this elk gets up on her legs and just starts running through the trees. He grabs his rifle, but it's not loaded. He doesn't know what to do. He loads it. She's already at a distance, no way he can get a shot. He doesn't know what to do. So he just aims it at the head that's leaning against the tree, shoots it, sees the elk all in the distance. So, it could, we're all thinking, if Buster says it could be, he's done some, he did some pretty, pretty remarkable things, and so we're all just sitting there, just mesmerized. Wow. He starts laughing at us. He says, white people always believe that story. What?
Wasn't true.
No, it wasn't true.
Totally. Sounds like not a question.
Not a question,
Not a
right?
question.
They say, hey, white people always
How
believe
long
that.
did you spend? How long did you spend with Native Americans? Or how did you get into that? You said you were looking for something.
Yeah, well, so what happened was I went to, this actually is a part of the story I didn't tell. I went to, I was building playgrounds there
Oh.
for the summer,
Mhm.
and then just made this connection to, really it was to the tiny man, Buster's son.
Mhm.
And then the following year, just basically settled myself in Montana.
Oh.
Was going to college, traveling the state, just doing whatever, just keeping myself busy. But the main thing was just, spending time with them. And actually, when then, I decided to, and Buster and Tiny Man, we really weren't so happy to see me in a way, because they wanted me to really be following Jewish traditions, not theirs. And eventually, Tiny Man, there was a woman on the reservation. There was a woman who was living there. I forget her name. That doesn't really even matter what it was. Buster said, it was Tiny Man, right? Tiny Man tells me, she got a pipe. Now, the pipes are what the Native Americans, they fill with tobacco, and they pray with it. And, when the smoke goes up, that their prayer should be attached to the smoke, and it should go up to heaven with the smoke. The smoke should carry up the prayers. So he says to me, so and so, this white woman, she got a pipe. I could tell, Tiny Man wasn't so impressed with her getting a pipe. So I say, yeah, I know that. He says, who gave her a pipe? And I said, no, I don't know. He said, so-and-so told her she could have a pipe, and he's also white. So I saw where this was going, And he says, I want you to be honest with me. You also want a pipe, right? And I was like, well, not really. And he said, come on, you want a pipe? I was like, look, Tiny Man, of course I want a pipe, come on. He says, listen, there's got to be something. And he said, you probably want your own sweat lodge, right? And I say, yeah, it would be nice. And he says, there's got to be something there's got to be something that your own grandfathers have that is similar in symbolism to a pipe and to a sweat lodge. So I knew nothing. I knew nothing about Judaism, about Torah, nothing. Other than I grew up until I was 17 in Teaneck, and we so disliked Orthodox people. I'm not even getting into the stories because they're just really not nice and don't need to be told. But yeah, we really didn't like the Orthodox community of Teaneck. And it's funny because my non-Jewish friends, would say, our Orthodox neighbors are so nice. What? Talking about? Don't talk like that. It's like, do you even know that? I was like, no, but you're Jewish, so and that's sort of how it went when I was growing up. So I knew nothing, and there was this conservative rabbi who would go on a monthly fishing trip. He didn't know the difference between a rainbow trout and a fish that was on the endangered species on the highly endangered species list, and he would just, whatever he caught on that hook was his to eat for supper. And I think eventually he realized they had to stop coming to Montana because he was going to get arrested sooner or later. But anyway, so he was coming to Montana on a monthly fishing trip, and when he would come, he'd hang out with like the few Jewish people who were there. And I asked him, I said, hey, what do we have in the Jewish religion that sort of parallels a pipe in significance in the way it's used? So he said, oh, tefillin. I said, oh, what's tefillin? And he said, oh, it's these boxes that are made out of cowhide, and there's written on it with parchment, which is made out of an animal. And I was like, wow, it's like straps made out of a cow. I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff from the earth there. That sounds sort of up my alley. And so next time I spoke to my dad, I asked him if he could get me a pair of tefillin. Because he was back east, and he said, oh, I'm not going to get you a pair of tefillin. I already have one, and you can have it. He tells me his grandfather gave it to him when he became bar mitzvah, and he wore it one time to please his grandfather, and that was it. So my dad, next time he came out to Montana, brought me a pair of tefillin. But then, what about the sweatla? And then I found out about mikvah. So I asked this conservative rabbi about mikvah, and he said, yeah, I asked him about if there's anything that parallels, and he said mikvah. And I said, how do I get to a mikvah? So he tells me that he has a friend, one of his closest friends is a Stoliner Chassid who lives in Borough Park. And I should go to Borough Park and spend Shabbos with this friend of his, Reb Tzvi Mandel. And to this day, Reb Tzvi is like an uncle to me. We speak about weekly. And so I went out to Borough Park, flew out to Borough Park, and spent the Shabbos with Reb Tzvi. And while I was there, at the home of Reb Tzvi Mandel, he introduced me to the book that the Midrash says, and R.E.A. Kaplan's The Living Torah, and Dr. Avram Yeshua Tversky. And that was actually the first book of Torah that I ever read was Avram Yeshua Tversky. And then a little bit later, before Shabbos, he took me to the mikvah, and I had a long ponytail. And he tells me, he says, listen, before we get into the mikvah, he says, listen, I just want you to know, people are going to look at you. And it's not because they don't like you. It's just that it's unusual to them. So they're just going to look. And that's okay. So I was cool with that.
Did you know everyone's going to be there naked?
Well, it was a mikvah. I mean, I didn't expect them to be babies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then they gave you a warning. Told you what you were getting into.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be so packed, but
Right.
it was, I honestly, to be honest, I thought that the funny shoes that some of the Hasidim wore was really the strangest part of it. I was trying to figure out what's up with those shoes.
They all strange.
What?
They all strange.
Yeah.
Like I would want to say, like could be spray.
I was trying to figure out what an antidote is, you know?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure it out 20 years later, 25, 26 years later.
I don't know how they grip the feet because they're like cut out.
Yeah.
They,
You know?
they just look really uncomfortable, and because they probably do a lot of walking. But I don't know.
But yeah, so but it was really you know, oh, and so I went into the mikveh, and Ritzi told me, he said, when you go to the mikveh, pray. Like, you know, when you put your head under the water, pray. Don't just dunk your head in. He said, you know, put your head in at least 4 times, but each time you put your head in, like, hold your breath and pray under the water. So I remember the first time I'm remembering that in like 20 something years, you know, like 26 years, I think. And the first time I'm remembering it. But yeah, like I put my head into the water and I just like, you know, just prayed. You know, it was really, it was a really nice experience. And then sort of fast forward a little bit. I wish I was still in touch with Tiny Man. You know, it's very hard to be in touch sometimes with Native Americans because they're really not into Facebook and social media and email, and they'll change their number frequently. You know, like if you want to see them, like you know where they live, go find them. You know, but if you don't want to go out to, you know, Montana or South Dakota or wherever, like they don't, you know, but it's interesting. So what happened though was, so I sort of like lost touch with Tiny Man for a long time, and we were, my wife and I, we had 2 small children. We were living in Flatbush, and it really became like a struggle because the Gashmias, like the, you know, the kid issues were like, wow, like hot pastrami and, you know, $100 whiskey, like, you know, I appreciate the Gashmias for like a week or 2, but, you know, after like a short while, it was like, look, this wasn't the Gashmias I became religious for, gave up my life in Montana for. You know, and if I'm going to live my life for Gashmias, this isn't the Gashmias I'm interested in. So my wife and I spoke about it, and we were really, at that point, it had been a while since we'd been in Israel, like a few years, about 4 years since we'd been in Israel, close to 4 years since we'd been in Israel. And sort of, you know, the goal of life became a Honda Odyssey. And a nice house with a lawn. That became the goal. And so I knew that I could get a job as an addictions counselor in Vancouver. And Vancouver seemed like a pretty cool place to live. And I knew that there was an Orthodox community there. So like we could be Orthodox and live in Vancouver. It sounded like a plan. And I don't know why I didn't call my Rebbe to ask, but I didn't. I called Tiny Man Yellokin.
Wow.
And Tiny Man, I hadn't spoken to him for years.
Does he like, what does he think of Orthodox?
Oh, so listen to what he
Did
tells
I
me.
miss it?
What?
Did he talk about it before and I missed it?
When I was first becoming religious, no, I didn't tell this. When I was first becoming religious, he was telling everybody about it. Like he was telling anyone who came to the reservation, came to like visit him or his father or their ceremonies. Like, I got this Jewish boy I got this Jewish boy so into his grandfathers, because this is the grandfathers, so into his grandfathers, and he's super gung ho, and he was really he would tell anyone he met. I don't know, I'm sure he stopped doing that, But at that time, he would tell anyone he met about this Jewish boy who he got into his grandfather's, and he so
You were going to Vancouver, so you called.
yeah. So he tells me, listen, I lived in Vancouver. I lived in Vancouver, and there's not a lot of spirituality there. So I say, what, tiny man, Vancouver? There's orcas swimming in the orcas and humpback whales swimming off the shore. What are you talking about? He says, the people there, they're very into pursuing their materialism. This is just another form of materialism that they pursue. He says, I don't think there's a better place for you than the reservation. He says, and I think you should go back to the reservation. He says, but you have a reservation. You have the Jewish reservation. It's Israel. Israel's the Jewish reservation. He says, and that's where you belong. You're not going to find yourself outside of your reservation, outside of the Jewish reservation. He says, and you have chiefs. Like we have chiefs. You have chiefs. He says, but I don't know who my chiefs were 20 generations ago. I don't know who they were 10 generations ago. But you had King David. He was a chief. He was the greatest chief of all, King David, and he was your chief. He says, you should be really proud of that. And you should go back to the Jewish reservation because that's where you're going to find yourself. So yeah, so then I told my wife what Tiny Man said, and she said, yeah, that's, but she said, makes sense. Now let's run it by the Rabbi. So we did. We ran it by the Rabbi, and the Rabbi, Rav Michal, he said, and maybe I shouldn't say this. It's being recorded.
I could.
Just stop recording it for a second.
Okay.
Just for a second.
Also, record. Oh my God.
Yeah, and that was really
Watching it.
what?
Someone watching it.
Well, I think it's more like suspect that to stop the recording and just saying whatever it is.
I don't want people to feel bad.
No,
Or
So how long did it take you to? So then you didn't go to Vancouver. You came to
No, we didn't go to Vancouver.
Wow.
We came to Israel. I
You
mean,
have to send Tiny Man a picture of you and your family, his address.
yeah. Well, my daughter is getting married in 2 months. I should really send him an invitation. I should send him an
This
invitation.
man found your pipe and what was it? Pipe and sweat lodge in Judaism.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you didn't go and find your pipe and sweat lodge, you would have just probably still been there.
Yeah. You know what they said? They said, and I sort of fought against him. I said, Tiny Man, I want to live here. I want to marry a black woman. I want to be here. I want to set up my life here. He says, go out east and see what they have to offer. See, find the chief of your own people, and experience what your own grandfathers have to offer. And if you're not satisfied, come back here. Come back to the Blackfeet Reservation, and we'll take care of you. Just
Such a great man. Such a great man.
yeah.
He
He
was
was,
gonna ask you 2 questions.
sure.
Why is he called Tiny Man? And
Okay.
number 2, do you feel like you have some ancestral, past life or whatever connection to Native Americans?
It's a really good question. They're both really good questions. So first, first, why is Buster called Buster? Okay, Buster is called Buster because he was a big guy, and he was trying to break a stallion, and the stallion bucked, and he went flying off. And he walks to the back of the horse, and puts his hand on the hind and gave it such a punch in the rear that the horse dropped. And no one saw such a thing. No one ever saw such a thing. And they just nicknamed him Buster after that. And the horse was broken after that. Literally and figuratively, the horse was broken. It was a rideable horse after that. Never a problem. And so that's why Buster's Buster. Tiny Man was called Tiny Man for a similar reason. But Tiny Man was not a big guy like his father. He was like a very petite guy. And in fact, that first time that I spent with him, we were when we were walking around, he showed me a Ford pickup truck out in the distance, and he told me that that selling drugs like cocaine is running from the border because it's right by the border, and there's no police. There's just so running drugs from the border like cocaine and heroin and stuff, like serious stuff, was how the young guys in the tribe made their money. And he was telling me, like, in 1 month he made $100,000. And he says to me, when you see that truck, that's all he has left of it. And he keeps it there not to drive, but as a reminder not to go back to that life. And then he was telling us about riding with the Hells Angels. You all know what the Hells Angels is?
Well, of course.
Yeah, you do?
Sure.
Okay. So he was never a Hells Angel, but he rode with them. And he was just petite guy. And like the Hells Angels, they're like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they had like a height, minimum to get in, like a height and weight minimum. Like, they're big guys. So he's with this, whatever, they were in a bar and they were drinking. And I don't know, one of the Hells Angels starts up with him, so he starts back, and he's just like tiny compared to this guy. I mean, despite they called him his real name is Don. His real name is American. He's like his white name is Don Yellowkidney. And Buster's actually John Yellowkidney. But so Tiny Man, this guy picks him up like that. Like, he didn't weigh anything, just picked him up. And Tiny Man just knocked the guy in the head, and just the guy fell backwards unconscious. I said, "Wow, you're a tiny man." So that's how they called him Tiny Man, just the name stuck, So that was that's how Tiny Man became Tiny Man. And regarding like, do I feel like I was like an American Indian in a past life? I don't think so. It's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know what I was in a past life, but I'd be surprised if I was. I'd be very surprised if I was. But I don't know what it is. It's what. I don't know what it is. It's some sort of affinity. It's some sort of I don't know. It's some sort of an affinity. I can't describe it. I don't know. I think that Rufus Franklin also has some sort of an affinity, no?
Yeah, I think everybody.
No? Yeah? Yeah. There's a lot to learn from them. There really is a lot to learn. They're very simple. They're just very simple, people, very non-pretentious. Yeah. What time is it?
9:52.
Oh.
We've got 8 minutes
Okay.
until Marv.
Okay, so you want another story that Buster told me, or?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Did you have any and you don't have to answer, a reminder we're on camera. Do you have any experiences with like ceremony or medicine with the Native Americans?
Really good question. When you say ceremony or medicine, do you mean
Peyote,
ayahuasca? Okay, that's a really good question. I actually wrote about it in my dissertation. So the answer is the Blackfeet do not use, well, ayahuasca is from South America.
Mhm.
Peyote is from Mexico, Arizona, New Mexico, maybe Utah and Colorado, I don't know. The Blackfeet must be parts of Colorado, like by the Four Corners area, right? Must be peyotes, probably native indigenous to that area as well, I'd imagine. That was a real contentious topic on the reservation when I was there, because and without going into all the details of, like, you know, just anthropology and the history, the Blackfeet are a Northern Plains tribe. The tribe that I was with, the Blackfeet, in their language, they're the Pukuni, and they are the southernmost tribe of a northern tribe that extends far into Canada. And there are no indigenous entheogens in that area. So when peyote was introduced, it was considered sort of an outside medicine. It wasn't Blackfeet medicine. And Tidy Man became an inherent of the Native American Church, which is the Native American group that uses peyote in ceremony. I'm sure there's others, but that's sort of like the main. I think it was interesting. There was a whole thing that the Agudas Yisrael of America represented them, because they didn't have money to hire, you know, highfalutin lawyers to defend them. That peyote should be legal for their ceremonial use. They didn't have the money to hire such lawyers. So somehow somebody in the Aguda heard about this case approaching the Supreme. I don't know which court. I think it was the Supreme Court. And the Agudas Yisrael of America represented them because they wanted to ensure this right, because they were afraid, hey, let's say something happens with wine, like in the Prohibition era, you know, it could be, you know, this could be a precedent used against us. So yeah, but to answer the question, Buster was very upset that Tiny Man became an adherent of this group. Not because he had anything against peyote per se, but he had something against Blackfeet looking outside of their own, you know, to use the word canon, you know, I don't know what the word would be, you know, of medicine, their own, you know, canon of medicine to heal their souls. You know, the Blackfeet don't do peyote. What do they do? And I never did this. It wasn't for me. But they would go on a mountaintop with, you know, I don't know, a pipe and a flute, or, you know, a drum, and just pray for 4 days without food. And they'd only drink water in the evening, and the water they had in a bucket. And they would have sagebrush, and they would dip the sage into the water and then suck the water off of the sage to get, you know, minerals and nutrients and vitamins. But then after about 4 days, they would have a vision, but the vision wasn't, you know, produced by an outside agent. It was, yeah, I don't want to get too much into the Blackfeet, you know. I mean, I really, they really discouraged me from doing their. In fact, they said to me, Tiny Man said to me, he said, you know, and maybe this is a good place to end it. He said, you know, when white people come to us, like, you know, Christian white people, we tell them to you know, they don't have anything, so we let them do our ceremonies. We let them have a pipe. We let them have even a lodge, sweat lodge. But because they don't have anything, and we feel bad for them. You know, everybody needs something. He says, but you're a Jewish. I say, you're a Jewish. You have so much of your own. You don't need what we have. You have your own. So we don't want you spending a lot of time with us, because you need to go. You need to find out what your own people have to to offer you, to give to you. You have to find out where your own inheritance is. And so that's, so they really discourage me from having anything to do with their religious practice. But you know, it was more just like, you know, hanging out with them and just having a good time with them. But I mean, I saw a lot of pretty unusual and amazing stuff when I was with them. So they're just, yeah. You know, I mean, the truth is, stories about the Baal Shem Tov, you know, and even, I mean, before that, you know, story about Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky that I read in his autobiography. When one of his I think one of his daughters got engaged, you know, it was way before, you know, cell phones or anything. It was just, you know, public phones with a quarter, no one, you know, and they had maps, and they were going. It was a 2-hour drive, or something. It was like a 2.5 hour drive maybe, and they made a wrong turn, and they drove for like an hour or two in the wrong direction, and they realized that it was wrong, and they made but as they were turning, as they were making that wrong direction, you know, that wrong turn, so Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, that's all he said, oh, you're going the wrong way. He said, they live in the other, you're turning right, you want to turn left. And they said, you know, his kids were in the car, you know, his kids were driving in the car. His kids said, you know, how do you know? We have a map, you know, this is, you know, you think, you know? I said, listen, I can tell because the stars are over here, you know, this is the way the stars are, and you're going in that direction, but, you know, you're going this direction, but the stars are like this, and they live in that direction. So if you know the stars, you know, you're going in the wrong direction. And, you know, his kids were like, that's ridiculous. And, you know, 2 hours later, they realized, you know, so they had to, it was an engagement. And so they had to call their Mechutanim and say, you know, we got a little lost, you know, and they realized, you know, just by being in touch with nature, because so much nature will teach us, so much. Yeah, and I was on a hike once, and it was over Shabbos, and I just felt as if I was in Montana in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. I just felt like, you know, the rocks and the trees were just telling me, like, keep Shabbos. This is Shabbos, keep Shabbos. So when I came home from that camping trip, that's when I started keeping Shabbos. But yeah, that's a different story for a different time.
What year we are talking about?
93 to 97.
Wow, it's just 4 years.
It's just 4 years, yeah.
And afterwards you got.
Oh, because they sent me to Boston. They didn't want me sticking around, so they sent me to Boston.
Straight to Boston.
They sent me to Boston, yeah. Well, actually, I had already been in Borough Park because there was this rabbi that I went to spend time with. Went to spend the Shabbos with, and yeah, I went to the mikveh. So they told me about the Boston rabbi. So I was a year in Boston, and then I went to yeshiva in Israel for a couple of years. That was.
You mean your wife like after this?
What?
You met your wife after all this?
Oh, that's a whole other story, yeah.
Was
But
she
yeah,
part of this, or-
my wife had nothing to do with it. No, she. It's ironic that she and I grew up, you know, pretty close to each other geographically, but no, she was, you know, she's, you know, to this day very, you know, very straight. Yeah, keeps me in line, you know, so I don't go, you know. I once said to her, I said, you know, I would love to I would love to live in Kedidata. She said, you wouldn't last a day in Kedidata. You might. Kedidata. It's right near Tzfat. little village. It's totally off the grid.
Where do you live now?
In Tveria.
Oh, that's
You
so
live
cute.
in the city or next?
No, we live in Tveria.
Inside.
In Shichendal. Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah, yeah.
How do you know? How
Yeah.
do you know Ellie?
Oh, we met.
We met at
We met
Amudim.
at Ahmadiyya, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What is your dissertation on?
My dissertation is on the, 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 the empowering journey as the quintessential therapeutic paradigm. Meaning like taking therapy out of the picture and like, can you just go walking? You know, like does a person need to sit in therapy or can a person just go walking? You know, or can a person take peyote? Or can a person get on a canoe and go, like is a person going to be better off floating 3,000 miles on a canoe or in a therapist's office? And I'm not giving an answer. Like I don't give an answer. It's just sort of, yeah.
Can I read it?
Yeah, sure. I can email it to you.
Yeah, I like to do that.
Yeah.
I could send the follow-up message to everyone here with the doctor's email.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's great. Yeah. I have, you know, and I love talking about these things. So if anyone has, you know, wherever, you know, in an office or at a school or for a class, you know, classroom, you know, I just love, you know, talking about these things, you know, talking about just, you know, reconnecting to nature and to the rhythms of our bodies, of our souls, of our minds. Yeah.
What do you think of a place like Flatbush? It's
Oh, well,
like,
so-
there's like so many Jews and it's like under there for years and it was a definite struggle on my spirituality. And
You live there in Flatbush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
No.
saying, yeah.
You know, it also you know, it's you know, I'm actually I have a long drive ahead of me, but yeah, you know, it's also the food people eat. You know, there's no story. You know, we need to eat foods that are storied, you know, that have stories behind them.
Yeah.
But if we're eating foods that don't have a story, you know, part of the nourishment of food is the story that's behind it. If we're eating food that doesn't have a story, you know.
So what is your opinion on like herbs? It's things that grow on the ground. That,
Oh wow, I could talk for 2 hours on this.
Or like
I would love to
cover,
talk
you
for
know,
2 hours on this. What?
Like what about cover? You know, like
What about?
cover? Cover, like the tea.
What's it called?
Cover,
Never heard of it.
really.
No.
It's like also it's.
How do you spell
origin
it?
is maybe Mexican or
Kava.
cover.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
kava. Yeah,
Like is that from the phone?
yeah, well, kava from the kava plant.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't-
saying all these things are from the ground.
Yeah, yeah. You know, but I mean, a person
Is
has,
that
you know,
like the whole
well,
thing
so,
is
so,
like-
so, yeah, it's a whole talk because, you know, also, I mean, you know, I mean, these things tend to get like very, like kava, and I mean, the Blackfeet were actually very, very, very interested in this whole topic was, you know, a big topic in the Blackfeet Reservation. And
I'm sure there's a farm line.
yeah, and I'm very interested in this. And basically, you know, kava, all of these things, you know, passion flower, kava, you know, they go in sort of fads, you know, so it'll be like a fad and everyone's taking kava, but it's like not everybody should take kava. You know, it's like, you know, talking about rhythms, like not everyone's body, you know, kava has vibration, it has the rhythm, it has a vibration, vibrational tone, but your vibrational tone might not be right for kava. And if you drink kava, that throws you off. So it's also knowing the, you know, the story and the vibrational tone behind the
And
foods
does
we eat.
that come from us or like who can we speak to know?
It's a whole talk. I mean, I could talk to you about it
That
for,
is a whole.
that's a whole talk. Yeah, there's a lot to say. I have a lot to say about it, but it's a whole talk, yeah. I could talk to you about it later, but if I wouldn't have to drive home right now, I would love to talk
I
about it.
mean, yeah, these topics are like the complexity.
Yeah.
The illumination.
Yeah, no, I love talking about these things. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.